to get a better handle of how is QBE a visual way of retrieving data, let me show you an example. And you can pull one up as well. Let's go to Google. Pull up Google. Morning. Now. What? Hilarious. Okay, so if you go to Google, right, put in a search term, any search term you like, and where I want to draw your attention to is up at this this gear icon at the top right. Okay. Because under there's something very, very handy for us, which from memory used to be on the Google front page. But one of the things about Google is they're trying to make their designs as minimalist as possible, hiding away features that most people don't use. What I'm after is advanced search. Okay. Now, if I come back around over here, what you are looking at right now, let me see if I can make this a bit bigger for you. Yep, that'll do. What you are looking at right now is a very simple example of query by example. Okay, simple example of query by example. What does it mean? You're searching a big relational database when you search on Google every single time. You're not actually searching the internet. You're searching Google's database about the internet. Okay, but how do you go about searching for things? Well, you could just put in that search term and let Google do all the work, or you could be a little more specific. And you could break it down in these kinds of ways, okay? Now, can you see how this is far more visual than this, okay? This is kind of like a, what we would call a command line interface. Kind of. The point is that if you want the computer to do something, you have to type up instructions and hand it over to the computer and say, do this, do that. It's kind of like a recipe, if you like, okay? Whereas, when you look at this, this is more like filling out a form, okay? And it's called query by example because the things that you put into, the things you fill out the form with, are examples of what you're looking for. And these are all about, you know, search terms and that kind of thing. But if you go further down, you know, for instance, have a look at this. Can you see how this really streamlines the way that search and retrieving data works? Because for instance, language, region, last update, reading level, all these kinds of things, they're going to be attributes of the different records in your database, right? And because there's only a finite number of options for this, right, it makes sense to put it out in a list there for you. You can choose from a menu, okay? Can you see how this is far more visual than actually typing in where language equals Armenian or Belarus, or whatever, okay? So this is a far more visual approach to it. So here's an example, and later on I'm going to ask you guys to find your own example, but can you see how essentially what it's doing is allowing us to search through a database in a visual way, and often it's actually called filtering, right? Filtering is kind of like a parallel term for it, because you're looking at all this data and you're trying to limit, restrict it based on examples that you give the database. Okay, so I think I've sort of described why did they go about developing this when SQL was around. Here's an example, and I've shown you how the visualness of it makes it very much quicker, easier to search through the data. Okay, it also takes the guesswork out of, you know, up here. You can only really construct this query if you already have intimate knowledge of what the database is like and how it's structured. Okay, you've got to know the names of the tables, and you've got to know the names of the attributes and be able to construct something like this. Whereas, you might not have known beforehand that all of these are the attributes that you can search for in the big database. Okay, but query by example, it tells you what they are. Okay, so you don't need to know that database well to be able to search through it. Okay, it sort of holds your hand through it, if you like.